Hey guys, I was just working through the editing process of a piece of content that I was sent for review from somebody for one of my clients' sites, and I thought it would actually be good to go through it together. So I made a copy of the document that we can look at, just to give you some ideas of, instead of a walkthrough of like how you write the post, things to think about that will make it a little better optimized and make it more valuable to readers. A lot of the content that I get from third party sources, guest writers, and things like that, it's written a little superficially, and I don't, you can't always push back and tell people like totally rewrite everything. But here's some things that you can just keep in mind while you're writing it that will make it read better, that'll improve the on-page time that your readers have, and give you more benefit if you're writing for SEO as you go through here. First off, the title. We'll come back to this at the end. We can probably think of something a little stronger than this as titles go. This clearly is what they had in mind for the featured image. That would be the first thing that I would say here. As a general rule, I never like vertical images as the featured image for a couple reasons. They don't lay out well. When they're shared on social channels often don't want them to be vertical, so it's going to end up cropping this. And then if it crops it, you don't actually have control over how that's cropped, and the image may not really be highlighting the things that you wanted it to anymore. It's just a bad presentation. And also, you never want somebody to have to immediately do a ton of scrolling in their first 5 seconds of the document. And while we're looking at this in Microsoft Word at the moment, it's going to create a similar effect when we're on the site of they've just read the headline and now they've got this gigantic image that they have to click down a lot of times before they get to any text. It's small things, but when you're in the game of trying to improve reader retention, a lot of what I'm saying might strike you as nitpicks, but take my word for it, just through trial and error through years. These are little examples of where if you create minor pains in the butt for the reader, here or there, they add up. They're not always something the reader is conscious of, but when you have a lot of these in the piece, they matter, and it matters not to have them. And so I don't like this because it requires a lot of scrolling. Opposite orientation would be ideal. And so, if you could, obviously the image isn't going to like make sense in this case with what it's about to be horizontally, to be landscaped like this, and it's still too square. I usually like them a lot more rectangular. An orientation that's kind of like that looks good as a featured image. We'd obviously want it to be like the full width of here, but something that's kind of like this. When in doubt, always go with something similar to YouTube's thumbnail dimensions, which is 1280 by 720. It's the original HD format. That is a fairly rectangular size. It's not overly gigantic resolution-wise, so you're not going to drag down your site load speeds. I just find that's a good rule of thumb. Something like this looks a lot better because, as you can see right off the bat, you can see this, you can see the image, and you can already start reading the hook of the article without touching your mouse, without flipping your thumb on your phone. It's just a better situation. The first pass that I'm going to make through this is just to address a thing this article does a lot that could be improved upon, which is they use long, blocky paragraphs. Now, this is something I had to overcome as well in college because I got a bachelor's degree in literature writing. Everything in literature is big 5 to 8, sentence paragraphs. It makes sense in books, especially old books, but it's not how people write on the web, and for good reason. In short, studies have shown that blocky paragraphs strike the reader as more dense, more complicated, more difficult to read. This is another example of one of those little subtle, they might not be aware that they're thinking it, but their mind is registering this looks hard to read. And taking the exact same text and just breaking it up, even if the wording doesn't change, perceptually it improves. And so usually when I'm spot editing these, you can slow down and like really think it through, but a lot of times you can just, I'm looking for sentences that need to go together for flow, and then when you're kind of making a related but separate point, that can be its own thing. And so you might even do something like this to break that up a little bit, or you could leave those together, break it here. Now this is a little shorter, and now we're talking about resale value, and bam, if it's dated, it could hurt your resale value. Alternatively, houses with modern bathrooms tend to sell fast. And this is good to do as well, to set like a point that you really want to hit somebody in the face with, kind of on its own line, so it's short and it stands out. It will linger in their mind a little bit more if it's isolated like this. I never want to have sentences that just feel like they're reiterating what we've just said. So here, we've already said remodeling your bathroom is an investment that has good return. Not to mention, it's a room that you walk through almost every day. I mean, yeah. But now we're saying remodeling this room in your house is worth the effort. We can lose that. That adds nothing to this. It just adds unnecessary length to the paragraph. You know that thing you do with your hand where you're going in kind of the circular motion, like, yeah. If you think reading it that you're doing that and that the reader might be doing it, lose it. You never want the reader to be thinking that, reading the content. All right, so we go through here. That would be another example of where you could just punch that out a little bit. Now, this is a lot less blocky. It flows better. And we can go through here. Now I'm going to stop at this subheading. They just have planning. I've harped on this in other videos of how we never want to have vague titles or subheadings, both because they're not very descriptive for the reader, and also for Google's sake, it doesn't know what planning is. Now, yeah, it's gotten way better than it ever used to be at understanding context of the things around it, and it does do that to try to understand the subheading. But I would always say, from an SEO standpoint, don't depend entirely on Google being really smart at looking at the surrounding stuff to figure it out. When possible, you just say it. And so in this case, what are we talking about? Bathroom remodels. So even just saying that. And if you want to highlight the word planning a little bit and italicize that, now we're still highlighting the fact that this section is about planning, but we're saying what we're planning. And we're getting the word bathroom remodel in the sentence in a way that makes sense and doesn't come off as spammy. That's a mild SEO benefit to do that, and a missed opportunity not to do it. All right, now, take notice of the fact that this paragraph begins with timely planning is critical whenever doing renovations. This will be important in a minute. Planning lets you know what to expect before getting started. With so many activities involved, it's essential to be very clear about your needs. How far do you want to go? If certain challenges arise, are you still willing to complete the project? That's a little longer than ideal, but we can keep it. But this block definitely cannot stay like this. So I would break it there so that we're talking about jumping into it too quickly. Mistakes can happen. Separate point. Do your due diligence by researching everything, blah, blah, blah. You could break it again here. By preparing as much as possible, you give yourself the best chance. This section here is an area I put a little piece that I'm going to add to this and change the format of it. This is just asking a whole bunch of questions, and it really needs more. I feel like this is superficial. They're like asking some key questions, but then this is all we got, and then this is kind of some other stuff. So I have this piece of content there. I'm going to paste this in right there, and then we're going to highlight these and make that a list. And if you can come up with a third thing here, great. But bullet lists are good for the user to scan. You could even break this out a little bit more so that when they're scanning, this little defining point that it makes it clear to the eye we're about to have a list is really easy for them to scan, and it looks good. Instead of them superficially just mentioning how much is the project going to cost, it can be costly. Yeah, obviously. Therefore, look for ways to save on the remodeling costs. This to me is very like, we're just saying words to say words, and we're not really helping the reader if we don't say anything else. And so I added this part because my client recently was just really harping on telling people that they really have to get the permits from the city. And as you can see here, I took the opportunity to contextually link this to another blog post we just wrote on the site, addressing the question of, does my remodel project need permits, and what happens if I do remodels that should have had permits but I didn't get them. And we go into all kinds of details about what happens there. Anytime you can, whenever you're blogging, always be thinking about how can we link to other related content that we've written. It builds reinforcement for this whole topic, generally speaking, and it just, the more Google can see how things relate to each other, the better all of the content is. And In this case, this is a relatively new post, but say that this was a post I wrote like 3 years ago. That post may have kind of petered out and doesn't have a lot of attention anymore. But if it's still really valuable information, linking to it in a new post is a good way to kind of like fluff it back up, that old content, because now something is referencing it. And then if people click this link and go to it, that attention may actually improve the rankings that may have fallen on that old piece. And so there's just a lot of reasons that it's beneficial to link to other content you've written. And this is a point that is not superficial like the previous one. They need permits. Getting these ahead of time and anticipating how long it takes to get approval will prevent potential fines. It also avoids having the project paused at inconvenient times midstream. Ideally, we would have a third bullet point, but in the interest of time, I'm just going to keep moving right now. Take a good look at the project and see if it's something you can do. Now, I don't know that I would necessarily say all this because this is for a site that sells remodeling services, and while we never want to deliberately withhold useful information from the reader just because we want to make a sale, I don't feel that this is useful to the reader and it's deliberately advocating against ourselves. Why would we be advising them to do it themselves? And so I would just say, not all tasks require a professional. Yeah, but they know that, and we don't want to stress that point because we're a professional. So take that out. That's not good. Well, then we don't need this section about what you can do in Home Depot because we're not talking about doing it yourself. So look at how nice and tight this paragraph has gotten now. Also consider how large your bathroom is. If you have a master bath that's 400 square feet, replacing the tile floor may take a long time. However, if your bathroom is smaller, items like that can be easier to handle on your own. I mean, yeah, but this is another superficial point that we're sort of like telling somebody like it's news to them. If you have a big bathroom, it's going to take longer to remodel. Duh. Like, my inclination ideally would be to delete this whole section and rewrite it because it's just fluff. And the more of this kind of stuff you have in the article, the less important it's going to feel to the reader. And if they're doing that hand thing again, yeah. And if they do that, we're losing them. And so I would say take that out. Now we'd have to change this conjunction of however, because now we're not coming off of that paragraph. So we would now just say, if you're hiring a professional, make sure they're licensed and have a solid track record of this type of work so you could know their bids will be trustworthy. I wanted to put this in. It wasn't in the original draft because my client has told me all kinds of stories about he's lost bids to other people who come in with bids way lower than everyone else, and it's because they're not doing stuff right. They're cutting corners. They're just straight up not following regulations, and the homeowner ends up going with those because they're like, wow, look at how cheap this is. And then it ends up being a disaster. And so, you don't want to throw shade in your copy, like don't hire a fly-by-night remodeler, but this is kind of a polite way of making that point. So measurements, I don't see anything super lacking with that. But just saying, taking bathroom measurements, at least we're reinforcing that it's, again, of the bathroom. It's a very minor SEO benefit to have that. But again, it's a small missed opportunity to just say measurements. It doesn't cost anything for the reader. Before buying renovation products for your bathroom, it's vital to take measurements. Now, remember when I said a minute ago to pay attention to the fact that they used the word critical in the first sentence of the paragraph? Look at that. They're now saying vital. I don't, as a writer, like to feel like I'm repetitively leaning on the same tactic or the same stance over and over again. It's acceptable to do it twice, although not ideal. But they do it a third time in the copy in a place that I have already changed, and I'll explain that when we get there. But I would say don't keep saying synonyms for vital, critical, crucial, whatever, over and over again. Because if every time we make a point in this article, we're like, this thing is crucial, this thing is crucial, this thing is crucial, again, that reader's going to do the thing with their hand. Yeah. And it's going to devalue what we say. It's kind of like the little boy who cried wolf. If we're trying to claim that literally everything that comes out of our mouth is vital, nothing is vital. Okay. So this would be a good place to break because this is an example from the point that we're making. Unfortunately, that's another potential place we could break. Now, little things in writing too, these are different words, but you know how they both start with you? As a nitpick for me, again, 2 is acceptable, but not ideal. I might change one of these words because you don't want, when the eye scans down the left, you don't want it to keep seeing the same letter over and over again. Just like when you're writing an email, if you become self-conscious of the fact that you're beginning every paragraph with I, and then you're looking at it like, damn, I'm making this all about me. Maybe I really need to change the sentence structure. It's kind of the same deal here, and definitely if we had a third paragraph that began with a U, we would want to change that. It just doesn't look good. So, many people end up cutting certain materials too small. You can't go back and add the material back onto the original piece, usually. Yes, obviously. Take proper measurements to avoid mistakes later when renovating your bathroom. I don't know that this section is really that important because, again, this is on a site where we're selling remodeling services. So it's fine that the homeowner should be doing measuring of their bathroom ahead of time so they can be helpful to their remodeler, but they're not going to be the ones cutting pieces, and so they're not going to be the ones doing the renovation. They're not measuring for that reason, and so this is kind of arguing a junk point that's irrelevant to anything, which now probably means some of the extra stuff we're going to say here needs to be rewritten, and it's a cascade. In the interest of time, I'm not going to rewrite all of this with you guys right now, but just a thought. That's what occurs to me when I'm reading this. So, moreover, expanding the bathroom entryway increases the number of potential buyers when selling the house. In their original copy, they ended here. I added a part right there because they're just talking about keep features such as sinks large as necessary, walking space is paramount. And I said, whenever possible, obtain architectural drawings ahead of time, especially if the remodel work involves altering plumbing or electrical or manipulating walls. Most reputable remodeling contractors will require this before beginning work. Again, with what I was saying before, a lot of this content is kind of superficial, and it doesn't make this article stand out from the 1,000 other ones just like it on the internet. So if we can't demonstrate in any way that we, as in this case a remodeling website, are professionals and we know stuff other people don't know, then we're not really being helpful. This client has told me that people over and over again have no idea that they should be doing this, and so this is good information in this blog. Obtain architectural drawings. This is going to allow them to know if they need to make structural changes, how they need to go about it, how they even need to do plumbing and electrical work. It's probably going to mean that they need to get permits. They're going to need these architectural drawings in order to obtain the permits because they have to plead to the city what kind of changes they're going to make, etc. And again, by mentioning most reputable contractors require this is a polite way of saying to the reader, if you've been talking to a guy who says, nah, we don't need any of that crap, don't be tempted to say, wow, it's so easy to work with this guy. He doesn't need all the paperwork. That's a red flag. But we don't want to throw shade, so this is a polite way of kind of making that point, that we're a reputable contractor, we require this. This is why we're saying you should have it. Okay, so again with the subtitle, lighting. Considering your bathroom's lighting. Because that's what this is really about. It's all about how we pick our lighting. It'll be a little stronger for Google. Good lighting for the bathroom is a change that can impact more than you might expect. That's the sentence that I did a quick edit to because they had originally once again said good lighting for your bathroom is vital. And I was like, oh my God, here we go again with the vital, like every point we're making is vital. So we're still kind of implying the importance of it, but we're at least saying it in a different way. And I know for a fact that a lot of people don't consider lighting. And this is where, as a writer, I can lean on my own experience and not just things that the client has said. I know personally when I've played with stuff in like my laundry room, I upgraded the bulb to a much brighter one at one point and was completely amazed by how much better it made doing the laundry. It was one of those things where it may not occur to you that it's too dim in that room, but once you see what brighter looks like, you're like, damn, what was I doing before? And so knowing that from my personal experience, I just put in this sentence, it can impact more than you might expect, thinking I know that if I felt that, other people might feel it too. So I also added this in here because they didn't have that in the original draft. That comes down to where the lights will be located as well as the color tone and brightness. Warmer tones can create a more homey feel, but whiter daylight bulbs can improve the perception of fine details. I know that bit just because I'm a flashlight nerd, and they talk about that in Cree LEDs and how it brings out detail and whatnot. And we can extrapolate from that the extra brightness that in my experience I noticed in the laundry room and what I know about flashlights would make details like brushed steel or brass pop. And since this article seems to be kind of geared at somebody looking to sell their house either right now or someday, they want to know that if they upgraded the sink with really attractive looking faucets and stuff, bam, we're really going to make those look awesome. Including stuff like this, even if this isn't strictly a sales piece, I always try when I'm writing an article to, when I'm making points, think of it in terms of, and how is this useful to you? How can I make that clear that it's useful to you? Is this useful to you in a way that I suspect you've not thought of or considered? And if I point that out, you'll be like, oh yeah, that's cool. That's where we make the article feel a little bit more useful to the readers. And so I added this in here. Remember to utilize as much natural light as possible. If natural light is not enough, offer cost-effective lighting solutions. I would break right there. This is a separate point, asking them for suggestions. I would break it again because now we're talking about recessed lighting. These things don't belong in a paragraph together. They're talking about different things. I would break again there. So now, see, we've taken all this blocky content and we've made it very punchy and very scannable, especially for mobile users, because always bear in mind that when we squish the width of the screen in for a mobile user, all of these paragraphs are going to be longer looking than they even look here. So if they already look more than 4 or 5 lines here, they're going to be super long on the phone. I would at least put the word bathroom in ventilation there. And now you see that we have the word bathroom in just basically all of our subheadings. Don't feel like you have to do that if doing it is going to look spammy, but I think that we can really legitimately do it every time in this article. And again, it's just a minor way. This article from an SEO standpoint will be slightly stronger for doing this than not doing it. It's not going to make a gigantic change, but we're always looking for wins whenever we can get them. So now I would break here. Installing a ventilation system incorrectly can lead to airflow problems. I'd probably put that on its own line to really drive that home. The bathroom is one of the wettest rooms in the house. Proper ventilation helps keep excess moisture from building up. Excess moisture comes with potential problems. I'd probably link these 2 sentences, which causes all kinds of potential problems. It just flows better. It is good to vary your sentence lengths. You know, if you have a long sentence, it's good to follow it with a short sentence just so that it's not too many long sentences in a row feel like reading a dense history book, but too many short sentences in a row just feel like, and then I went to the store, and then I tied my shoes, and then I looked outside, and then the sky was blue. Like, it just sounds like you're a child, and we don't want to do that either. So in this case, I just feel like we improve the flow by conjoining those sentences into a compound sentence to make it a little longer. It can lead to the peeling of wallpaper, causing you to dig in and get deeper into your wallets to resolve later. Choosing the proper bathroom fan helps keep the humidity in check. Again, these changes that I'm making aren't making this article ideal and really polished, because ideally there are a lot of parts in here I would rewrite entirely and I would take a slightly different tack as a serious sales piece. But this is just sort of and I'm taking longer to explain what I'm doing. This is something that if I were doing not on video, I could do in under 10 minutes. Just scan through here, fix some of these up, change a couple wording, space things out a little bit better. And it's sort of this is a 10-minute tweak that already makes this article read better, present better, have a better chance of doing what we want it to do, stuff like that. I would also, for something of probably this length, it says it's 1,000 words, you could get away with at least 1 or 2 more internal links on this without looking spammy to Google. And so, if this were your site, you would be saying like at least 1 in each of these sections. So like here, you'd be saying, anywhere else on our blog, have we mentioned stuff about moisture buildup? Well, in this case, just for you guys, on this site, we have talked about mold remediation and the causes of mold and stuff like that. And so on that one sentence where we talk about it can cause all kinds of problems, that would be a good way to rephrase and say, this can contribute to mold buildup, which, can cause all kinds of repairs later. Link to that article if they want to know more about that. And it also just reinforces to Google that our site does talk about mold and moisture, not just in this article, but elsewhere. And it helps both articles to do that. And then they end with, regardless of the vision that you have for your bathroom, it's important to follow the proper steps when renovating this part of your house. There are many items that seem easy to repair and renovate at first, but end up being a giant hassle. Plan out your entire scope of work in advance. I would put this out and hire out parts of the process that you feel like you should. See, this is, again, like, it's not focused with who we're talking about, and it's not taking into account who are we when we write this piece. It's sometimes the challenge with ghostwriters is that they don't spend enough time putting themselves in the headspace of both who are we talking to and who am I as the client. It again doesn't make any sense for a professional remodeling site to be telling people, you plan out the whole project and then you hire out parts you feel like you should. How are they going to know what they feel like they should? They don't know how to do a bathroom remodel. And this isn't a home and garden television website where we're teaching people how to do it. We're selling this. And so we don't, especially, this is the end of the article. This is the last point that we're leaving somebody with before they're done, presumably right before we do some kind of call to action. And this wording accidentally creates the call to action. So basically, you don't need us, or maybe you kind of do, but it's unclear when you do. And bringing in a professional can help you. That's pretty weak as far as a call to action goes. And so we could do a lot better than that. You want to summarize the post, and so maybe just make some points like proper planning and measurements can really help with the bid process for you to know when you're collecting bids from contractors who seems in line with your expectations. And when you select a contractor to actually do this work, having some of those measurements and plans in place and the architectural drawings really smooth the process for them to come up with the plan for you. You're not the one making the whole plan of how it happens. And then they're going to run with it. And you can sell the benefit of how easy it is. This is an intimidating process. If you have to gut your plumbing and do electrical work, it's probably scary. So what we're selling in that case is ease. Trust me, this guy's going to handle it. It's going to go to plan. He's going to get you all the permits you need. There's not going to be any snags because of the good planning. It's going to be beautiful. We need to end with that kind of feeling, so that when we ask them for a sale, it feels natural to them because, well, yeah, I'm feeling good and this sounds like what I want to do. All right, there's more we could do with that post, but I don't want this video to be super long. But I hope this was helpful to give you guys a little bit of my own thought process when I'm reviewing articles from some of my other writers to put on client sites, and a little bit of my thought process for when I'm writing my own content that can help you tighten up your content. And most of all, I mentioned the word superficial a couple of times early on. That would be a standout piece of advice I want you to take with you from this video is sometimes we can think that we are giving away, quote, good information just because other blogs on this same topic that's as far as they went. And I would say that's the problem. You have got to stand out, not just to the readers, but to Google. It's so competitive to be one of the top 10 on page 1. And one of the big things Google's going to look for when looking at the copy itself is, did you demonstrate knowledge and trustworthiness that the next guy didn't? And a big way that you do that is writing the kind of piece that makes points that nobody else is making that other people might reference. You know how when we're doing research, when we're writing content, we look up other sites and then sometimes we'll reference or link to it? The idea is, as much as you can, be the piece that somebody else would probably want to reference and link to. Not only because those backlinks are a positive signal to Google that we're awesome, but just when we're writing at the level that our content really deserves links like that, it's way more likely to rank and get the attention that we're doing. You don't want your writing and your blogging to feel like busy work. And if we keep making superficial, whatever kind of points, that's all this is going to be, is busy work. And then you'll get frustrated and you'll feel like you're spinning your wheels, and we don't want that. And so anyway, put your questions below in the comments, and if you have ideas for other ways of thinking of content that you'd like me to dive into in the next video, go ahead and ask, and I'd be happy to consider it. Thanks, guys. See you in the next video.